The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected. One step closer to ending war in the world, one step back inside a potential ceasefire in Europe while peace breaks down in the Middle East. And Tesla targets more dealerships up in flames. Just how widespread the problem has become and what the Department of Justice is doing about it. And the future of the American economy, why the vice president says the days of cheap labor overseas should be coming to an end. This is the National News Desk, America's News. Now I am Dee Dee Gatton, and we begin with a live look off the Florida coast. As you see right here behind me, just minutes ago, Boeing Starliner astronauts Sonny Williams and Butch Wilmore finally back on Earth, a moment 10 months in the making. The SpaceX Dragon capsule has finally splashed down safely as we take it up in full here. The pair spent almost 300 days aboard the International Space Station on what was supposed to be a one-week mission. We will have more on their unusual story and how their extended stay will impact their health later in the show. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin spoke for more than an hour today as the two look for common ground to finally end the war in Ukraine. Some agreements were made to take certain targets off the table, but Russia still has more demands they want met before they stop the fighting. With all the latest on these negotiations and where things stand right now, here's national correspondent Atrel Nashar.
Seeking Russia's agreement to a 30-day full ceasefire in Ukraine, a highly anticipated phone call between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin, ending with a plan to keep talking. These negotiations will begin immediately in the Middle East, according to a White House readout of the call. The leaders agreed that the movement to peace will begin with an energy and infrastructure ceasefire, as well as technical negotiations on implementation of a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea, full ceasefire and permanent peace. And the Kremlin says on Wednesday, Russia and Ukraine will each exchange 175 prisoners. A major sticking point, Russia says in order to stop the conflict from escalating, Ukraine must be cut off from intelligence and military aid. For years, Trump promised he could end this war quickly.
And I'll have that done. I'll have that done in 24 hours. I'll have it done.
Now, the president tells Full Measure's Cheryl Atkinson this.
Well, I was being a little bit sarcastic when I said that. What I really mean is I'd like to get it settled.
America's European allies are not leaving this entirely in Trump's hands. They're making plans of their own to both increase pressure on Russia to end its invasion and prepare to keep Eastern Europe secure once the war is over.
Now is the time to engage in discussion on a mechanism to manage and monitor a full ceasefire and agree to serious negotiations towards not just a pause, but a lasting peace.
Backed, Starmer says, by strong security guarantees through what's now known as the Coalition of the Willing, a group of European nations, plus Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, led by the UK, supporting Ukraine seeking an end to the war.
Our militaries will meet on Thursday this week here in the United Kingdom to put strong and robust plans in place.
On Tuesday, Germany's parliament took the first step toward approving a historic increase in defense spending. With Germany accounting for Europe's largest economy, the debt-conscious country has been under pressure from NATO to boost its military budget. In Washington, I'm Atrel Nashar for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
While Russia and Ukraine are possibly on the precipice of a ceasefire, the Middle East has plunged back into war. Israel continued its strike inside Gaza as they say they are targeting Hamas terror strongholds. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the airstrikes are only the beginning and are necessary to free the remaining hostages. Much of the Arab world, including Egypt, Qatar, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia, want Israel to abide by the ceasefire that went into effect on January 19th. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the world needs to agree on why this war started in order to end it.
I mean, we're sitting around as the world sort of accepting that it's normal and okay for you to go into a place, kidnap babies, kidnap teenagers, kidnap people that have nothing to do with any wars, that are not soldiers, that are not anything, and taking them and putting them in tunnels for almost a year and a half. And we're acting like if this is a normal exchange, this is a normal thing that happens. This is an outrage. So they should all be released. So I'm not going to comment on what we're going to accept or not accept, other than all of us. The whole world should continue to say that what Hamas has done is outrageous.
A federal judge says the dismantling of the U.S. Agency for International Development likely violated the Constitution. In a ruling today, the judge blocked Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency from making further cuts to the agency. He also ordered the Trump administration to restore computer and email access to all USAID employees placed on leave. The Trump administration did not immediately comment on the ruling. New development, several Tesla cars were set on fire today at a Tesla service center in Las Vegas. Authorities saying the suspect used a gun and several Molotov cocktails. This as two Tesla Cybertrucks burned in another apparent arson attack at a dealership in Kansas City. This happened late last night. More than a dozen other Tesla businesses have been targeted across the country in the last few weeks with acts of vandalism, arson, and even shots fired. The Department of Justice has opened an investigation. The Health and Human Services Department is ordering 3 organizations in Maine to change their transgender sports policies. HHS told Maine's Department of Education, the Maine Principals Association, and a high school that they violated federal law by allowing males to compete in girls' sports. The agencies have until next week to take action. Joshua Reeby, the last person believed to see the missing University of Pittsburgh student Sidiksha Kanananki alive, was in court today. He is not considered a suspect at this moment, but has had his passport taken away for the time being. Sidiksha's parents are asking authorities to declare her legally dead. She has not been seen in 12 days and is believed to have drowned. They say they have seen no evidence of foul play. Today was the deadline for the Trump administration to provide details in writing about when it was decided and by whom to send hundreds of alleged criminal and gang members on a plane out of this country to El Salvador. While the White House celebrates who was removed from the country, legal experts worry about how the operation was carried out. Here's the National News Desk, Christine Frizzell.
On the use of the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to deport 261 alleged criminals and gang members, a full court press from the White House.
These were bad people. That was a bad group of, as I say, hombres.
They are actually foreign terrorists and alien enemies of the United States.
They are organized, they have a command structure, and they have invaded our country.
But perhaps a more critical question stems from the action itself. Did the Trump administration deliberately disobey the order of a federal judge when he sent the migrants to El Salvador to be housed in a high-security prison there?
By the time the other order came, the plane was already over international waters. We're going to refuel over international waters, come back and bring terrorists back to the United States.
The timing of the decision central to Judge James Boasberg's directive to Justice Department attorneys to provide in writing the details of who knew and decided what, when. Legal experts pushing back against the notion the order in writing came too late.
For the executive to say, we weren't sure whether you had to write it down or say it or sign it in crayon or put it in quill. When a court issues an order, that's an order.
An order the president has asserted he doesn't have to follow, in a post calling on the judge to be impeached, prompting a rare rebuke from Chief Justice John Roberts, writing in a statement, impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision, adding the normal appellate review process exists for that purpose.
All right, so a lot of people in Washington asking this now. What happens if President Trump did deliberately violate this or any other judge's order? And there are some answers. Well, he can be held in contempt. There are fines that can be imposed and escalated. But remember, this is also where Congress is supposed to come in and provide a check on his power, though so far, Didi has chosen not to.
So I'm curious, Christine, do we know what Trump's legal team is telling the federal judge?
Yeah, so as you said, the initial deadline was at noon today to fill in some of the holes about what time the planes with the migrants left this country, when they landed, and precisely where they were when the judge issued the order halting the removal, which also said, by the way, if a plane was in the air, it needs to turn around. Now, DOJ lawyers, who still don't believe they have to provide this information, have until noon tomorrow. They're insisting if they do, they want to keep all the information under seal, quote, in order to protect sensitive information bearing on foreign relations.
Live from Washington, D.C., Christine Frizzell, thank you so much. Commerce Department staffers are banned from using China's new AI model DeepSeek on their government devices. According to Reuters, the move was announced in an email in an effort to secure information systems. The app's rollout sparked a market sell-off earlier this year. Investors were concerned that it seemed more efficient than apps like ChatGPT. Coming up next, the city's at extreme risk for fire weather tonight, with tens of millions of people under alerts. Then the warning a Texas lawmaker wants everyone to read before they log on to a social media platform. Then later, the new tools making it easier for criminals to commit fraud against American taxpayers. We'll be right back. Right now, 30 million people are under red flag warnings or watches in the central United States. Forecasters, they are warning of extremely critical fire weather conditions for parts of New Mexico, Texas, and Oklahoma, and critical conditions for much of the southern high plains. Some cities at highest risk are Lubbock, Amarillo, Midland, and Odessa, Texas, and Clovis, New Mexico. Further north, blizzard conditions are expected starting tonight from the central plains to the Midwest. Heavy snow is forecast first in the Central Plains, then in the upper Midwest and the western Great Lakes. That's for tomorrow. Travel will likely be very difficult and dangerous in the upper Midwest tomorrow afternoon and evening because of heavy snow and strong winds. Vice President J.D. Vance addressed the importance of American manufacturing over the cost benefits of cheap labor. Speaking at the Third American Dynamism Summit in Washington today, the vice president called cheap labor a crutch and said the countries that do the creating are the ones that get good at designing innovation. He says it's one of President Trump's visions of bringing that innovation back to the United States.
Our goal is to incentivize investment in our own borders, in our own businesses, our own workers, and our own innovation. We don't want people seeking cheap labor. We want them investing and building right here in the United States of America.
Part of that plan of incentivizing domestic manufacturing is tied into foreign tariffs, which are expected to increase again on April 2nd. And it's not an immediate dividend. Leading members of Congress actually talk about possible steep price increases on consumer goods in the immediate future. The National News Desk, Chris Daniels, was at Washington State's Congressional Delegation's Economic Summit last night.
A short distance from the Port of Seattle on the Amazon campus.
You know, they're actually building the rocket ship as they're launching it. And I really think that is the trade policy that you've got today.
The elephant wasn't just outside the room, but being addressed inside of it.
President Trump just sees tariffs as a tool of American power.
Cleet Williams, a former Trump administration special assistant on trade, acknowledged the haphazard rollout of tariffs on Canada and Mexico as Washington lawmakers suggested damage may already have been done.
It is like we are in this horse race but the president wants to put 25 pounds on our horse and make it harder.
Senator Maria Cantwell, former Senate Commerce Committee chair, suggesting at the summit sponsored by the Washington Council on International Trade that further tariffs on $18 billion of annual imports to Washington from Canada are about to hit consumers.
Whether that's aerospace or agriculture or software, practically everything we do in the Northwest, more than 50% of its sales are overseas.
Can Congress actually stop these executive orders from going into place?
We do have a role here. There have been presidents who've gone too far in the past, and Congress has reined them in.
She specifically cites how a past tariff fight with India in the first Trump administration prompted problems in the state's lentil industry to this day.
What's your plan for coexisting with China?
Congressman Adam Smith is still leaving open a door that a trade deal can be reached sooner rather than later.
It is affecting us right now because businesses have to make decisions based on what they think is going to be happening, not just today, but next month and 6 months from now.
The agricultural industry, including Washington wheat growers, may be the first to feel direct effects with a reliance on Canadian fertilizer and exports throughout North America if this tough talk on tariffs escalates.
Federal Reserve policymakers are meeting this week to decide what to do about interest rates, and it is unlikely they will cut rates. Last month's inflation was still at 2.8%, above the Fed's target of 2%. The Fed is expected to give an update tomorrow. Also, Whole Foods is recalling boxes of their frozen 365 Whole Foods Market small bites macaroni and cheese balls over allergy concerns. As you take a look right here at what we're talking about, the FDA says boxes with a best by date of November 29, 2025 may contain undeclared eggs and meat ingredients. Whole Foods recommends that if you have the item, throw it away or bring it back to the store for a refund. The federal bribery trial of Nadine Menendez is now underway. The wife of former New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez is accused of being involved in a scheme with her husband to help Egypt get U.S. military assistance in exchange for money and other perks. Nadine is also charged with fraud and extortion and has pleaded not guilty. Her husband was already sentenced to 11 years in prison. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We're taking the pulse of America, and we start in Utah with a very young porch pirate.
So the little girl approached our door very timidly. She looked nervous. She's young. You can see that she's young in the video. And she kind of makes a curve around our camera, but then she looks right up into the camera, grabs it, and takes off running down our lawn.
A few hours earlier and a few blocks over, another house was hit twice within 5 minutes. Another neighbor captured the same girl placing Post-it notes over doorbell cameras. In each video, a different outfit. Some with face coverings, others without.
So she's changing clothes. It's kind of interesting, which makes me think, you know, there's older people behind it.
Nearly 2/3 of teens use social media daily, according to the U.S. Department for Health and Human Services. But that usage can lead to mental health issues, something Austin student Ayan Moladina has dealt with.
Seeing all of the different things that my peers are doing on social media, hanging out with friends, and all these different things that I feel left out of, it contributes to mental health struggles.
Pediatrician Lauren Gamble says the more time spent on social media correlates with higher levels of depression, anxiety, or suicidal thoughts and actions. HB 499, introduced by El Paso Representative Mary Gonzalez, seeks to change that. Every time a person opens a social media app, a warning label would appear. The user would then have to agree that they understand the risks associated with social media use and mental health issues before continuing.
Dr. Kenneth Davis isn't ashamed to say affirmative action helped get him into med school. He's retired now, but the issue remains.
The concern is that there are no shortage of black physicians in the city of Cincinnati.
On its website, Will champions President Trump's rollback of DEI policies across the federal government. Should the federal government find children's programs to be discriminatory, Will says children's will need to either cut the programs and only offer education and training opportunities that are race neutral, or risk losing millions in federal funding.
It promotes, again, this idea of individuality where people are considered based on their merit or their need, as opposed to a stereotypical or racial balancing interest.
Coming up, the progress that still needs to be made to protect our government against fraud. We'll be back after this. Cutting fraud, waste, and abuse of taxpayer money has taken on new life in Washington with the new Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. Spotlight on America national investigative correspondent Angie Moreski got exclusive insight from key players who have been in the trenches for years fighting fraud and calling for change to save citizens money.
We knew it was going to be bad.
Rebecca Shea has been in the game fighting fraud for 2 decades. You guys are the watchdogs for taxpayers.
We are indeed, yes.
She's director of the Federal Government Accountability Office Forensic Audits and Investigative Service Team. They were among those predicting massive fraud was likely during COVID.
There was a little bit of a wake-up call with the pandemic. I think there is greater attention to it now.
Shocking cases of fraud against the government were exposed during the pandemic. Billions of dollars stolen by both individuals and foreign criminal groups making fraudulent claims for government benefits. But Shea says all too often some government agencies still are hesitant to admit they are victims of fraud.
Our response is, well, if you aren't looking for it, you're not going to find it.
Her team produced this stunning report last year, estimating the federal government loses between $233 to $521 billion to fraud every year.
That $521 billion number really kind of, it's eye-popping.
It is.
What does that say about our efforts to fight fraud against the government?
It says that we need to do a better job at prevention.
This is from the dark web, and these are individuals that are stealing from the state of California.
LexisNexis Risk Solutions government CEO Haywood Talcove has also analyzed fraud for decades and says the onslaught of artificial intelligence tools is making it even easier now for criminals to circumvent government benefit systems.
So help you God.
I do.
At the first House subcommittee hearing on DOGE, Talcove was first to testify.
The use of AI is fundamentally changing society, but in the hands of criminals, it has become a weapon.
He warned the public sector is lagging far behind in fighting fraud, with the private sector averaging a 3 to 5% fraud rate compared to government, which he estimates at 20%.
The fact of the matter is the 50 states don't talk to each other. The federal government doesn't talk amongst its agencies. And what that does is it enables the criminals.
COVID exposed weaknesses in government systems, like failing to verify identities up front, allowing self-certification for applicants, and failing to cross-check between states and agencies to reduce duplicate and ineligible applications.
Is cross-checking between states for benefits still an issue?
It is still an issue.
Some states still not doing it. Is that frustrating?
It is frustrating.
Shea says there has been progress with more fraud prevention tools being used now, like the Treasury's Do Not Pay list. It allows checks across multiple agencies to determine things like if a person is deceased, in federal prison, or delinquent on taxes. But Spotlight checked the Do Not Pay website and found only about half of states are using it.
What do you think when you see so many that aren't making progress?
Disappointment.
In February, the GAO put out its high-risk fraud list. It identifies areas with serious vulnerabilities for fraud, waste, and abuse and is updated every 2 years. Of the 38 on the list right now, the GAO says only about a quarter have made progress since 2023. For Spotlight on America, I'm Angie Moreski.
And to find out if your state is using fraud tools like the Do Not Pay list, just head on over to spotlightinvestigates.com. Click on this story. We'll have a link for you to check out there. Coming up next year, the challenges the Starliner astronauts are likely to face as they transition back to being on Earth. We'll be right back after this. The two splashing down off the coast of Florida just a little while ago, but although the journey is over, transitioning back into civilian life could prove to be challenging, both mentally and physically.
And there's a lot of things that happen to the human body over time in what's called the microgravity environment of space that cause some degradation to your bone, to your muscle, and many other systems really in your body.
The 286 days Williams and Wilmore spent in space, among the longest single space missions in NASA history, but not the record. Astronaut Frank Rubio holds the record of 371 days. That's going to do it for this edition of the National News Desk. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tonight at 10.